Kia ora koutou katoa, and good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to begin by outlining the action that we have taken in the aftermath of yesterday's news that two New Zealand citizens returning from the UK to visit their dying parent were allowed to leave a managed isolation facility without a COVID test and then subsequently tested positive. This case represents an unacceptable failure of the system. It should never have happened, and it cannot be repeated. From the beginning, we have taken an extraordinarily cautious approach at the border. That is why we have required every returning New Zealander to go into a facility that we manage. That protocol remains. That is also why we required not one, but two tests to be undertaken of those in facilities. One at day 3 and one at day 12. That should have happened in the cases we learned about yesterday. It did not, and there are no excuses. Our borders and the controls at our borders must be rigorous. They must be disciplined, and they must have the confidence of ministers and all of you, New Zealanders who got us here. This morning, I have called together the operational leads of our quarantined and managed isolation facilities and can share the following changes that I have required. Firstly, I am appointing the Assistant Chief of Defence, Air Commodore Digby Webb, to oversee all quarantine and managed isolation facilities, including the processes around the exit of those who have been in these facilities. Air Commodore Webb will regularly report to ministers. As the Assistant Chief of Defence, he can also seek access to our military's logistics, operational expertise, and, if needed, personnel to assist in the running of the facilities. Second, Air Commodore Webb will undertake a start-to-finish audit of existing systems and written protocols to ensure they are being fully implemented, and will make any changes needed to further strengthen our border defences. Third, the suspension of compassionate exemptions will continue until such time as we can guarantee a disciplined and rigorous system at the border that ministers have confidence in. I know this will be upsetting to some New Zealanders seeking to return home to visit dying relatives and loved ones. However, the risks to our collective efforts to eliminate COVID are simply too great. I cannot allow the gains we have all made to be squandered by processes not being upheld. Throughout COVID-19, there has been pressure from many corners, including the courts, to relax the rules around compassionate exemptions. This case has proven our need for caution. While it may be a hard and unpopular position to take, it is the right one for our country. I do want to stress, though, that the two New Zealanders involved in this case, they have done nothing wrong. It is not their fault that the system failed, and from all accounts, they have followed the health protocols required of them and have not come into contact with anyone since leaving managed isolation other than their parent as per their release plan. This error also doesn't change New Zealand's COVID status. Our definition always assumed there would be cases at the border. That, of course, also doesn't change the fact that our contact tracing and testing has kicked in, and anyone who has in any way come near these individuals on their flight or in their managed isolation facility will be tested as per our protocols. Our efforts to date to beat the virus have been extraordinary. However, there is no room for error, even if it is human error. It is totally unacceptable that procedures we were advised were in place were not. Our job is now to fix that, and that is exactly what I intend to do. I'm now happy to take your questions.
Prime Minister,
I'll come to Dover, Jessica, then Jane.
Prime Minister, will anyone lose their jobs over this?
Ultimately, my focus is on fixing the system. Dr. Bloomfield, as you will have said, has acknowledged that there has been a failure within the system that health is a part of. I will leave it to him to work through where responsibility may lead to lay there. My job is to fix the system, to give New Zealanders confidence, and that is why I am bringing in the Defence Force to help in that work.
Well, I'm sorry, were you personally contacted by those two women?
No, not that I say that I do not believe I have been. If I was, I never personally saw it.
Should have brought the Defence Force in earlier, should this have been something that had been in place?
Sorry, what was that?
Should the Defence Force have been brought in earlier? Should this have been in place already?
Yeah, there have been a range of different operational inputs into our quarantine facilities. It has included the police, it has included Border Force. My view is we need the rigour, we need the confidence, and then we need the discipline that the military can provide in what is a significant logistical exercise. Bringing them in will give added confidence to ministers, but I hope also the public. Jane?
Why is testing not compulsory at the border? We have a pamphlet given to someone ahead of a test today that says you have the right to refuse the test. Why is it effectively voluntary when the move to level 1, it was made pretty clear, I thought that it was going to be compulsory?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is equally what, as ministers, we've been advised testing takes place not just once, but twice. We, of course, need to make sure that we then have the legal standing to require that of individuals coming in at the border. Regardless, the advice we received was that it was taking place.
Yes,
Jane, go back, go ahead.
Does the government not have the legal authority to require or force someone to have a test, and what happens if someone refuses?
I believe we do have that standing. Of course, we are constantly making sure that that is not something that can be challenged. But we also have the ability to put people into quarantine and isolation. So regardless, we have the ability to keep other New Zealanders safe through those measures.
If people refuse a test, they would be moved into a much more stringent quarantine,
They are, of course, they are, regardless of the testing regime, the isolation regime provides that additional layer of confidence and comfort. We need to keep in mind the reason we've had both at the border is because testing can provide a false negative. The most cautious approach has always been one of isolation for 14 days, which is why that is what we had at our border and still have at our border.
Prime Minister,
Barry.
Why is it fair that people that want to get to their loved ones and to dying loved ones and to funerals are penalised, whereas those who were meant to have carried out the test are not?
Well, again, Barry, I'm not presuming what the final outcome will be of the Director General's work to ascertain what happened within the health system in this case. I'm the first to acknowledge that the decision we've made here to suspend compassionate leave will not be a popular one for many, but I have to prioritise the health, safety and well-being of New Zealanders. That is my job, and so my view is until we can have complete confidence in the system, that is the best course of action on behalf of New Zealand. So Barry, go ahead.
Isn't it your job also to instruct the Director General of Health in the actions that he should be taking as a result of this?
Well, of course, the understanding that we as ministers had was that there were particular protocols in place. We have since learned that that was, in this case, not what has happened. That is unacceptable. We cannot have a system where our greatest vulnerability is at the border, where all of the protections we have put in place have not been applied. So we will suspend access to compassionate leave until we can be confident that everything that was required to keep us safe is actually happening on the ground, and I've brought in a member of the Defence Force to assist with that.
Prime Minister,
Yes, in the front.
You say you didn't want to make sure this doesn't happen again, but it's kind of already happened with the two teenagers who fled in Hamilton. Do we know if they've been tested and if contact tracing around them has gone on?
In that particular case, we had someone who has absconded as opposed to having been granted leave. Again, when I talk about us needing to have confidence, rigour and discipline in our isolation facilities, that means making sure we have the security that New Zealanders and indeed ministers expect in those facilities. We have had uniformed individuals working them. We have had oversight to ensure people are doing what they are required to do, and that is stay put. I'm now bringing in additional resource so we can have confidence that is happening.
Back on the suspension of compassionate exemptions, these are people who are now going to have less time with their dying loved ones or people who are grieving because of something that is no fault of their own. Do you recognise how unfair that is and take some responsibility because it was effectively a government botch up? So what do you say to those people?
My job is to keep New Zealanders safe. I know the decision to suspend compassionate leave will not be a popular one, but it is the right one. We have to be assured that we are keeping even those individuals who are seeking the leave safe and their loved ones safe. If we have a situation like this occur, despite protocols that were in place, that is not acceptable. I must be reassured that we are meeting the expectations of New Zealanders, and that comes first.
Have you been given an update on how widespread this is? We've spoken to several people who have not had tests before they've left isolation in the last few days. Have you been given an update on that? Because it sounds like it's more widespread even from the people that we've been speaking to.
No one should be departing their quarantine or their managed isolation without a test. The Director General has again issued that requirement for anyone who is departing. Keep in mind, though, again, previously, 14 days was the requirement, and that, again, is the most cautious approach you could take because of the fact that some testing will not pick up illness. And so 14 days is still the most cautious option. The Director General and our expectation is that everyone is also being tested. Down the back.
Compassionate leave has been granted on, I think, 198 or close to 200 occasions. Have you been told how many?
In total, I understand, since of course we've had this system.
Are you aware of how many? Have you been told how many of those were allowed to leave who had not been tested?
Again, the expectation the Director General has shared with me is that those who have been granted that compassionate leave should have been tested. But the Ministry of Health is working through those cases.
The National Party has called for David Clark to resign. What do you say to that? And second question, why not cancel all exemptions? Because surely they must carry the same risk as compassionate. Why just focus on that one?
And yes, absolutely. As I've said, I've asked the Assistant Chief of Defence to come in and look at all exits and audit the entire process. The expectation, of course, being that we can be assured that everyone who is in quarantine, regardless of whether or not they are seeking exemptions or not, are being managed properly. And so that includes the whole system.
Economic exemptions as well that aren't listed as part of the...
Keeping in mind, the economic exemptions aren't seeking to come out of isolation. They are actually just, their exemption is the fact they're allowed to come in the first place. They are required to be in those facilities for 14 days.
Resignation call for the Health Minister to take responsibility.
Oh, look, on that, the Minister is in exactly the same position that I am. We both find what has happened here unacceptable. It is counter to what we were told was happening at the border. Our job is to fix the situation. I also remind people that the Minister of Health has been part of the team that has otherwise overseen a very successful strategy to date. And so no, I will not be removing him from his post. He is part of fixing this issue, not part of the problem. Yeah, I'll take just two more.
Will you change the
Oh, sorry, and then Ben.
masks? No?
Sorry, what was that?
Will you change your policy in wearing face masks now?
Well, one of the things I will say is that for the two individuals here who were obviously under the wrong circumstances, but who were given the ability to leave managed isolation, were in fact wearing face masks. I come to Ben in the last question.
Explain there's been breaches of testing protocol now beyond those 2 cases. Can you rule out any sort of resourcing issue? Is it just plain incompetence from the health department?
I can rule out a resourcing issue, absolutely. We have the ability to undertake thousands of tests. We were advised that not 1 but 2 tests were taking place of those who were in managed facilities, and of course an expectation that anyone who was undergoing consideration for compassionate leave would be tested. It is absolutely nonsensical that you wouldn't. And that is why we have suspended that compassionate leave until we can resolve those issues. Last question, over here.
Do these errors at the border indicate that we should have mandatory contact tracing in businesses?
I see that as a separate issue. These issues demonstrate that actually when we give an instruction, we expect it to happen. Last one.
How does this impact the work you're doing around expanding quarantining?
Well, look, the point that I would make there is that there has been significant pressure coming in from a wide range of quarters, not least some of my colleagues on the other side of the House, to widely expand our borders. We have always said that we needed to be cautious. I utterly stand by that. This is proof of why we need to act with New Zealand's best interests at heart. This is a growing pandemic, not a slowing one, and we should be extraordinarily careful, and I send that message to the opposition. Last one, thanks you.